Hey everybody, Dave Hagan here. Today I want to talk about Elon Musk's productivity tips. Seriously? That's today on the Financial Wellness Podcast.
Welcome to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to the financial success. Here is your host, financial problem solver and talk show host, Dave Hagan.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Financial Wellness Podcast, the TFWP as we like to call it. Coming to you from beautiful downtown Van Nuys, that's near Hollywood, California, for those of you in the know. Welcome to Mr. Brian Reed.
TFWP in the house.
I like it. All right, so here at the podcast, we love Elon Musk. I think he's going to go down as one of the biggest industrial innovators of all time. I think he's going to end up being in the same category as Thomas Edison or Henry Ford or even Steve Jobs. A brilliant mind, thinking on a different level, trying to change things for humanity on a very micro level. But does he know business? Well, let's look at that. I saw an article recently on Fox Business, and it was talking about an email that Musk sent out to his employees. I think it was last year. And he was talking about some of the ways that he wanted the company to be more productive. And he was vitally interested in having Tesla more productive at that point because they needed to get that Model 3 out the door. He said that he was potentially a couple weeks away from losing the whole thing because they had issues producing that car at scale. Now it seems like they're doing it better now, but a year ago it was a big deal. So he sent an email out kind of exhorting his employees to be more productive, congratulating them on some of the things that they had done. But there were a couple of interesting drawouts from that email, and I thought it would be interesting to talk about that. Number one, Musk says that excessive meetings are a blight on big companies. Okay. He says that large meetings should be done away with unless they provide value to the entire audience, and even then they should be kept short. Now, I haven't worked for a big company in my entire life, but that seems to me to be, kind of right. I mean, that doesn't seem that out of the ordinary. Brian, what do you think?
Does the meeting have a point?
Yeah.
If you're going to have a large meeting, there's a lot of people there. So are they all 100% invested in whatever topic is being discussed?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were some meetings that I had conducted for a nonprofit some years ago, and there were like captains of industry. They would actually, the entertainment industry, and they would actually show up to these meetings. But I would put together an agenda complete with time allotments for each item on the agenda, because you can't keep a busy person there for 2-3 hours over the allotted time. And it seems to me that some of these meetings just run on and dominated by people that maybe aren't adding to the valuable bottom line of the meeting too.
And then politics gets involved. And
Yeah. So, okay. Have fewer meetings. I like that. Number 2, walk out of meetings. Elon says
That's
it's not
awesome.
I don't know, is it? He says it's not rude to walk out. Rather, it's rude to make people stay. He says it's okay to walk out of a meeting or simply drop off a call if the other side's not adding value. Really? I don't know.
Look, you take away the negative connotation associated with walk out. I'm going to walk out of this. Or you go, no, it's time to walk out because it's no longer valuable to me. It's no longer, my job is to do this. We're not discussing what's valuable to what I need to do. Therefore, yes, I have to leave.
Yeah.
Bye.
I mean, I see your point, but I don't know. I mean, I come at it from basically the sociological view of it. You got a meeting and somebody walks out, even if they say, hey, I got to go. It's like you are no longer important, or, the heck with you, or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. I think that's more rude than it is beneficial.
I don't think, if you look at it in terms of the marketing department is now talking, not R&D.
Yeah.
All right. Well, R&D is going to go, marketing's talk? I don't market. I do R&D. I'm leaving. Maybe what you're saying is brilliant, but I don't know. I work in R&D, so I'm out.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, maybe if you walk out after making a statement explaining why, maybe that would be better rather than just packing up and moving out.
There you go. You have the person go, all right, now we're moving on to marketing. So R&D, you guys go, and marketing come in.
Or someone says, hey, you're talking about, this last item on this agenda is something that's not relevant to me, so I'm going to step out if you don't mind. But I don't know. I mean, I think if you're Elon Musk, you could probably walk out of any meeting that you want, especially if you own 25% of the company or whatever it is, right? They'll just go, okay, it's cool. Go do something else. Go invent, the next rocket or the next car with 600
Sorry,
horsepower.
guys, I got to go. I just had an idea about something.
Yeah, and you'd let him. But I don't think especially if you're a lower on the rung person, I don't know if you can walk out. And if you don't do it right, I think it'd be kind of rude. I don't know. That's my take on it. Number 3, don't over abbreviate. Well, I get this. Musk says you shouldn't need a glossary of terms just to do work at the business. And yeah, I get that. Washington is a big offender of this. Washington, D.C. loves abbreviations like POTUS. Well, what's a POTUS? I know what it is, but I mean, that sounds silly. Just say, hey, the president, Now they're using SCOTUS. That's the Supreme Court of the United States. Why don't you say the Supreme Court? And if you're talking about POTUS and SCOTUS, what do you call congressmen? Think about that. I don't even want to go there. They've got something called the PIOC. Well, I think that's like a secure room that the president goes in the event of an attack or something. I think there's a PIOC in the White House. There's the EEOC. There's the LMNOP. I think that it's kind of always offended me. Like you're not on the inside because you don't know what the abbreviation means. The United States Trustee's Office, which is a subset of the Department of Justice, they call it the UST. It's like, why don't you just say the Trustee's Office? I don't know. How have you felt about this, Brian? You're not offended?
I'm not offended.
Okay.
It's just like, is it faster?
Yeah.
Now, if we're really going to say that, though, then just call it, TP, toilet paper. The president, TSC. That's if you're, actually typing these things out, then just reduce it to keystrokes.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know. They see you see these reenactments of what goes on in the White House, and they go, POTUS is on the move. He's in the chariot. I guess the Secret Service does that for their own reasons, but I don't know. I think it also, when you're referring to people, it kind of creates a sense of overimportance for that person, or I don't know. I kind of like this. I kind of agree with Elon on that.
Keep it personal.
Yeah, or keep it relating to non-personal things. I don't know. The next one, streamline communication. So he says, don't enforce chain of command communication. Only CC those that actually need that information. I don't know. I get that.
Yeah.
My wife worked for a medium-sized company, and she was kind of towards the top, and she had thousands of emails every day, and it would consume her day. She'd actually come home and answer emails, and maybe not even answer them, but she'd be, at least looking at them, so she kind of knew what was going on. But it took up a huge part of her day, and you can not read them, but if they're CC'd to you, then I think you're kind of responsible or held responsible for what's in there.
I think it's a defensive move, and maybe that's a corporate culture thing where it's, look, we're going to streamline communications, but if something gets missed, because it will, it's business. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
We're not going to punish. Yeah. If it happens repeatedly, if you keep choosing to not CC the correct people, then there's a problem. You don't understand your job.
Right.
But I got to think it's a defensive move. It's just tell everybody, so therefore it's, hey, I told you.
I told you.
You missed the email.
Didn't you read it? Yeah. Yeah. So I think that, it's more of a defensive move than anything else, but it takes up, from at least what I can see, huge amounts of the day in terms of people wading through all these emails, to say nothing of all the junky emails that just seem to come in. And I used to just go delete, 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 delete. But lately I've been going, no, unsubscribe. But that takes 2, 3, 4, 5 more keystrokes. And it take, again, more time. It's amazing how many people get your, get your email.
Maybe this is why I went with the defensive strategy analysis. My father, he had a nickname. They nicknamed him Memo Man, because when he would have a conversation with someone at the company that he was pretty high up in, he would always memorialize everything with a memo, so there was a paper trail and there was accountability. So maybe that's part of it, is that everyone gets CC'd. You knew, it's on you.
Yeah, no, I get that. But boy, it takes up more and more of our day. Another tip: use common sense. Duh. Right? Duh. How long did it take you to figure that out, Elon? I don't know. I could be a little critical of my man here. Duh. It's amazing how much common sense you don't see, though, sometimes. It's amazing to me. So I don't know. What are some of the takeaways here then? Well, great industrialists, great genius industrialists, aren't always great business people necessarily. I hear that he is really tough to work for. A friend of mine had a son that worked at SpaceX, and he was just thrilled to be working for a company that was making rockets. But he said when Elon was on the floor, he was pretty tough, because he's 3 steps ahead of everybody else, and he doesn't really want to know all the little details. He just keeps trying to do these additional things and features and things that he wants to do, and he just expects everyone to execute without any hitch. When they had the problems with the Model 3, he actually lived in the factory. He overtook a conference room and slept on a sofa and lived there. I think he'd be pretty tough, but that's part of what makes the company continue to move forward, I think. And I also think that, there's some nuggets of gold in this information. Just this email, fewer meetings. Yeah, I get that. Don't over abbreviate. Oh, okay. Streamline communication. Use common sense. Duh. But I don't know, Brian. I don't know if I'd walk out of a meeting. Interesting things to learn from one of our heroes, Elon Musk. This is Dave Hagan, and you're listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button, or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. As an additional bonus, each month, Dave will randomly draw from the submitted questions and pick the winner of a free 1-hour personal conversation with Dave to help you achieve your financial goals. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications. Let's listen in now as Dave answers some emails.
Hey, Brian, before we get to those emails, I want to talk a little bit about some feedback from our listeners. And we do hear feedback from our listeners from time to time, not only in emails or the audio emails that they send us, but sometimes I'll bump into somebody who'll say, "Yeah, I listened to your podcast," and of course my first response is, "Really? How cool! Thank you." But I love the feedback that we get, and I wanted to share that or a little the feedback with some of our listeners. I recently spoke with a retired fellow, and he was a corporate type, and he'd done very well for himself over the years, and I'm guessing he now lives off the interest from his investments, and his house is paid for, and he drives around in a nice car, and does what he wants to do. But he said, "Look, I've been listening to your podcast, and I thought, wow, what could you learn from my podcast? You've done it. You've done it all. You've played it the right way. It looks like you got all the success." And he was saying, I was listening to the episode where you're talking about New Year's resolutions, and it said it caused him to think about, going back and getting back in step with his his goals, and he still had goals being retired, and he wanted to write down his goals, not resolutions, because he remembered the message. We're not that fond of resolutions, but written goals and written steps we really like. And he said even in his retirement, it caused him to sit down at the beginning of the year and get back to writing down some goals that he wanted to pursue in his retirement. And that's cool. That's cool. I mean, a lot of people that listen to this podcast, millennial age, but here's someone retired, probably, what do they call it? The greatest generation, what was before baby boomers, the greatest generation. World War II. Maybe he wasn't even that old, but, picking up a thing or two from the podcast, being, interested or entertained enough to keep coming back. And I don't want you to get too big of a head, Brian, but he also said, and I like it when Brian says stuff. He's so funny.
Here's the $20 I promised you for saying that.
That's right. Here you go, right? You haven't even met that person, but someday maybe I'll introduce you. I spoke with another guy who said that he listened to the podcast, and he was in the middle part of his life, and he says it caused him to think about setting up an emergency fund. He'd never really thought about that before. And this was a guy that, again, was doing pretty well in his life, but he had never thought about setting up an emergency fund. And his comment was that it was so freeing not to be living paycheck to paycheck. And I thought, wow, what an interesting thought. And that's one of the things that we talked about. And maybe we spend a whole nother podcast talking about the freeing effects of that. But he said it was a key lesson that he now wanted to instill in his kids. I'm sure his kids really look forward to that conversation. Hey, Dave and Brian say, but so much of the country lives paycheck to paycheck. And for him to, have less worry and stress and to feel free about not having to worry about that, wow, that's something we were able to do. That's pretty cool. In fact, he said he called his emergency fund the Dave Hagen Emergency Fund to remind him of what the account was for. And, hey, thanks for the vote of confidence and, with the name of the fund. But the key is you've got month-to-month sustainability and you feel freer, and it's a positive effect on your psyche.
And if you do if you think about, okay, worst case scenario, all of a sudden you have a job loss and you don't have an emergency fund. Mm-hmm. Now you have two major problems. I don't have an emergency fund, and now I have to go find a job. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Versus, hey, this isn't good. I lost my job, but we have the emergency fund. It's okay, and now I have time to go try and find a new job. Mm-hmm. So, of those two problems, one can be prepared for.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, if we can have a small part in helping somebody with that.
Hey, amen.
How cool is that? You talked to somebody recently.
Yeah. This was actually kind of, I was not expecting to hear this from this guy, but he bought some knives at one of those little kiosks
right
in the mall.
Right.
And he's been working on moving from having showing, wealth, mm-hmm. Versus trying to get it in the mindset of really having it.
Right.
So let's transition from show to work on the emergency fund mm-hmm. and mm-hmm. have, mm-hmm. True wealth, work towards it. And he started talking to the guy and was like, I like the knives, but just not, it's just not worth it. Now, maybe it was because it was a kiosk. I don't know, but he was able to negotiate with the guy, mm-hmm. and he got him for $15 cheaper.
Nice,
and it's only $15, but I think the real takeaway for him was he didn't feel like he was being cheap, by trying to mm-hmm. negotiate with the guy. He just saved $15,
right?
And he's like, that's going into the emergency fund, and I didn't feel bad about it. It's not like I was. The negative association, I think, that he had with trying to get something at a lower price was gone because now his goal is to save.
Right.
So he told me about that and I was laughing. I'm like, hey, there you go, man.
He's kind of empowered by a little change of thinking from listening to
Shift your focus away from,
listen to the podcast.
from one thing onto what your goal is,
Yeah.
and it changes everything.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes in a negotiation like that, I'll tell people, look, I'm sure it's worth every bit of what you want, but I'm just not a buyer at that price. It's just not what I would pay for that. Now, if it's something less, let's have a conversation. But you don't want to run their product down. You just say, look, at that price, honestly, frankly, I just wouldn't be a buyer. So is there some other thing that we could do? And I think that's pretty cool. I mean, why not? Why not save the money? Why not put the rest of that money? I mean, it would be a shame if you saved the money and then you went out and bought lattes with it, right? But if someone's taking it and putting it to work in their investment account, in their retirement account, in their emergency fund, going backwards through our progression, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I mean, if you put that into savings, and if you get money doubles every 10 years?
Yeah, at 7%.
All right, so there you go. In 30 years, it's $45.
It's a lot of money. No, it's definitely a lot of money. Very cool. Well, part of the reason that we do the podcast, I mean, Brian and I have other things that we could do on our mornings here, but part of the reason that we do this, and Brian drives some distance to come in, is to give people some thoughts on how to be more, I don't know, how to be more thoughtful in your financial life. It's not about being crazy and living like a pauper. It's more about having a plan and being more thoughtful in what you do. And it's also interesting that when we get comments or themes, we hear themes of things from different people. And it's interesting to see that sometimes we'll have a theme and people will pick up on that and it'll be beneficial. And sometimes it might even just be an offhand statement or comment, even something leading up to something we think is funny, and it provides some value to the listener. So that's so cool. That's so cool. Keep those comments coming on the website, thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can send me an email. It goes to the iPhone in my pocket. You can leave an audio question. That comes to my pocket as well, so you can communicate with us as quickly as possible.
And check out the picture of Dave and Warren Buffett.
Yeah, me and my buddy Warren, not Jimmy, Warren, the second or third richest man in the world, worth 83 some odd billion.
And you've got your picture taken.
And I got my picture with him. I don't know. He was nice to meet, but he seemed a little stiff. He seemed a little, I don't know that he's a public persona per se, but check out that picture at thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. All right. I didn't know we were going to get so involved in that, but we've still got some time for an email. So, Brian, what do you got?
I've got an email here. I'm actually going to change the name. I'm going to call him Bill, but Bill needs some... I think Bill needs a little direction here, Dave.
Okay. All right. Let's help out Bill.
I'm 30 years old, single for the time being. I don't have to work more than 30 hours a week, and the job allows me to pay my bills. My father recently passed away and left me about $60,000. What should I do with it? I'd like to buy a new Lexus because I think it'd be a fitting tribute to my father to drive around town in a nice vehicle because he never gave himself that nice vehicle. What do you think, Bill?
Bill. Here's what I think, that driving around the Lexus, that's a rationalization. Your dad always wanted to drive around in one. It's a rationalization. Think about it long and hard. I wouldn't do it in a million years. The fact that your dad wanted it, no, I think your dad actually would want you to do something else. He didn't indulge. I don't think he'd want you to indulge. I think you want that Lexus more than you think. Now, might be different advice if you're talking about a Tesla, but we're talking about a Lexus here, Bill. Come on. So I think that's a rationalization. I would not do that. Why would you use that to buy a depreciating asset? That Lexus is going to go down in value. If it's a new one for 60, can you get a Lexus new for 60? I don't even know. But if it's 2 years from now, it'll be worth half. Half of that nice tribute will be gone, and it won't seem that cool anymore,
It'll be worth half the moment he drives it off the lot.
Yeah. Wouldn't do it. Resist. So let's talk about some other things. First of all, You say your job allows you to pay your bills. So my first thought would be, if you get some money, pay off your debt. But if you don't have any debt, that's very good. That's amazing. Good for you. You don't need to use your inheritance to pay down the bills. So now what else are you going to do? Well, I don't know. It's kind of up to you. Maybe a down payment on a condo or a house in some parts of the country. Maybe you just throw it in an investment account and you let it start to grow. You poke your head up in 10 years, that's now $120,000. Or maybe you put it in an account and every year you take the money that it's earned and you, I don't know, give it to a good charity every year. That would be a fitting tribute to your dad. Lots of things that you can do, but to get together $60,000 is really hard, especially in the economy that we're dealing with. The vast majority of the people are living pretty tight to the line these days, and to put together 60, that's maybe a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity. So
put that in the bank and leave that alone.
Bank it. Yeah, bank it and let it grow. I mean, if you're 30, let's think about that. If you're 30 and you're going to work till you're 60, that means you got 30 more years. That means you have 3 10-year cycles to double that money at 7%. So 60 goes to 120 in the first cycle. 120 goes to 240 in the second cycle. That goes to $500,000 at the end of the third cycle. So you retire and there's like $500,000. Now you might not want to not enjoy that or do something else with it, but look at those opportunities. You could get ready to retire, when you turn 60 in some parts of the country, and that's if you're just getting 7% on the money. So there's lots of things that you could do, but I wouldn't buy the Lexus. I wouldn't buy a car.
No.
What would you do, Brian?
If I needed a vehicle, I would get a used something.
Right.
And then put it in the bank.
Yeah.
Just let that thing grow on its own.
Yeah. I think Bill is doing all the right stuff. He's 30, he's paying his bills, not working as long as he maybe would with a typical job. So it means he appreciates the importance of free time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No debt. That's huge. But to let that start to grow, that could be, even my buddy Warren probably started with $60,000 and look where he's at now. He's sitting only behind, I guess, just Mr. Jeff Bezos in terms of wealthiest man in the world. So I don't know. That's what I would do. I'd kind of bank it. I think Brian and I are the same mindset. And also, if it's in the bank and something happens to your job or your income, you got something to fall back on. It makes you feel a little more relaxed, a little less worried about what's going on in your life. You can afford to take some more risks, perhaps. So that's what we would do. That's our best advice, Bill. Hey, thanks for the email and thanks for writing in. Brian's still sitting on a fist of emails, but I think that's going to be the time that we have for the show today. So stick with us. In the next show, we'll get to these other emails. Brian just showed me one. He kind of slid it over on the table. Really interesting. So stay tuned. This is Dave Hagan, and you've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button, or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. Remember, Dave will randomly draw from the submitted questions and pick the winner of a free 1-hour personal conversation with Dave to help you achieve your financial goals. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications, or share the podcast via the app with your family and friends. This is your announcer, Nick Appel, wishing you every financial success.